You take the total business investment of the United States divided by the total number of workers in America, it's 28 grand. In Canada, it's 15 grand. The Canadian worker gets about 55 cents for every dollar of his American, and they're both measured in USD. Tradespeople who build homes can't afford to live in them.
Entire generations of people are losing confidence in the Canadians' society because of the housing crisis.
Why is it that we're still importing oil when we've got the world's third biggest supply? Why is it we can't export our natural gas?
I think that was perhaps the single stupidest thing I ever heard a politician say. Your federal government spent $6,000 of your family's money going over their budget.
Two of Trudeau's most vocal critics, Pierre Poilievre and Jordan Peterson, have emerged as key voices pointing out the grievances of a nation battling uncertainty.
Justin Trudeau's mode of governance is to top each scandal with a bigger scandal.
Pierre Poilievre has established himself as a central figure in Canadian politics, leading the charge as leader of the opposition and head of the Conservative Party. Known for his articulate speeches, relentless focus on economic issues, and ability to connect with disaffected voters.
After 9 years of this Prime Minister, everything is broken. 25% of Canadians are now living in poverty. 2 million lined up at food banks. 38% more people are homeless. Housing costs have doubled. It wasn't like this before this Prime Minister, and it won't be like this after he's gone. Will he put us through another year and a half of this costly hell, or will he call a carbon tax election today so we can elect a common sense government to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime?
Poilievre represents an alternative vision for Canada's future. As we move forward, I'd like to ask you a quick favor to subscribe and like this video. It takes just a second and helps us so much. Jordan Peterson, a globally recognized psychologist and cultural commentator, brings a different yet complementary perspective to the critique of Trudeau's leadership. While Poilievre's focus often lies in the political and economic spheres, Peterson approaches Canada's challenges through the perspective of societal values, identity, and the psychological impact of governance. His critique extends beyond policy to address what he perceives as a crisis of responsibility in Trudeau's leadership.
Probably the minister in Trudeau's cabinet who's most fervently
he describes himself as a socialist.
Economy. Well, this is the thing. So he described himself as a socialist. And so the Liberals, and that's Trudeau's party, have been a centrist party, historically speaking, and they were the home of the classic Liberals, all things considered. And they like to steal good ideas from the left and from the right and chart Canada's course down the middle. The thing about Trudeau's Liberals is they're not Liberals, is they're far left socialists. And they came to power in the guise of Liberals, and that meant that they're bloody. Their government was fraudulent.
Canada's economic landscape under Justin Trudeau has been one of persistent inflation that has burdened Canadians from coast to coast. Grocery bills, utility costs, and everyday expenses have skyrocketed, eroding the purchasing power of citizens.
I can't buy certain fruits, certain vegetables because it is not in my budget.
Stop the war! Leading to protests last winter at grocery stores across the country.
Many Canadians report struggling to make ends meet, even as wages stagnate and fail to keep pace with inflationary pressures. Also, a staggering 700 billion Canadian dollars in investment has left Canada for the United States over the past decade. Critics point to Trudeau's tax and business policies as a significant factor in this outflow. High corporate taxes and excessive regulation have made Canada less attractive to both domestic and international investors, and entrepreneurs, faced with barriers to innovation and expansion, are increasingly relocating their operations to countries with more favorable business climates. This investment avoidance has also been tied to a lack of clear and competitive policies to support key industries such as technology, manufacturing, and natural resources. In comparison, the United States has successfully leveraged tax incentives and strategic investments to lure businesses and stimulate economic growth. For Poilievre, this trend is indicative of Trudeau's inability to create an environment of prosperity, leaving Canada in the shadow of its southern neighbor.
If you take business investment and divide it by the number of workers, the American worker gets $28,000 of investment measured in US dollars.
This is per capita?
Per worker.
Or per year?
Per worker, per member of the labor force.
Okay.
So you take the total business investment of the United States divided by the total number of workers in America, it's 28 grand. In Canada, it's 15 grand. So the Canadian worker gets about 55 cents for every dollar of his American, and they're both measured in USD. So how is the Canadian worker?
That's investment in future productivity?
That's investment in machines, in technology, warehouses, factories.
I see.
Any capital investment that businesses make divided by the number of workers, that's the measurement. So now that means they're getting better technology, better new machines, better tools than our workers, and they will be able to crank out even greater wages for their people than we will unless we catch up with that.
One of Trudeau's signature policies, the carbon tax, has been heavily criticized. Promoted as a solution to Canada's climate change goals, the policy has instead been described by Pierre Poilievre as a cash grab that places undue financial strain on Canadians without achieving significant environmental gains.
Was he telling the truth? And either way, he's got a major political problem that he is now totally inseparable from the Trudeau record. He supports the carbon tax. He supports the attack on our energy sector. He told me in a parliamentary committee that he opposed Canadian pipelines, even though his company has invested in pipelines in the Middle East and in Brazil. You know, he is part of the Davos agenda. He's just every bit as radical as Trudeau. The only difference is he's got a nice banker's haircut and suit, and he wears navy blue socks rather than polka dot socks.
The burden of the carbon tax is felt most acutely by rural communities and provinces reliant on resource-based industries like Alberta and Saskatchewan. For them, the tax represents an additional cost that further jeopardizes livelihoods already at risk due to shifting energy policies. Under Trudeau's leadership, Canada's energy sector has faced significant challenges, including the cancellation of key pipeline projects and a lack of support for oil and gas development. These decisions have excluded resource-driven provinces, which argue that the government has failed to recognize the energy sector's importance to Canada's economy. Pierre Poilievre and Jordan Peterson have both dissected the systemic issues that affect the housing affordability crisis.
The cost of compare the cost of building a home to the cost of buying a home.
Yeah.
And he said, what's the gap between those two things? So they added up land, labor, profit for the developer, materials, and they compared that to the sale price. And they found the gap was $1.2 million. So that's $1.2 million of extra cost above and beyond the materials, the labor, the land, and the profit for the developer. So where's that going? Well, the answer is development charges, sales taxes, land transfer taxes, the delays in getting the permit, time is money, the consultants, lawyers, accountants, lobbyists that the developer has to hire in order to get the approval. So in other words, we're spending twice, in Vancouver, we spend twice as much on bureaucrats than we do on all other things combined to build a home. More money goes to bureaucrats than goes to the carpenters, electricians, and plumbers who build the place. And to add insult to injury, those tradespeople who build homes can't afford to live in them. But housing is 60 or 70% more expensive in Vancouver. So on all the measures.
So we're making less by a lot.
Yes.
By a lot.
By a lot.
Yeah.
And we're paying more.
Paying more by a lot.
Yeah.
Right, and most of that's transpired in the last 10 years.
Yes, and we're paying the difference by accumulating enormous quantities of debt.
One of the primary factors they identify is the growing inefficiency of the municipal planning and zoning systems. Bureaucratic red tape at the local level has become a major obstacle for housing developers seeking to build new homes. Municipal governments, driven by environmental concerns, not in my backyard sentiment, and bureaucratic inertia, have put up numerous barriers to the construction of new housing units. Lengthy approval processes, restrictive zoning laws, and a lack of coordinated planning between provincial and municipal authorities have led to a housing supply crisis that far exceeds demand. The result is a severe mismatch between the need for housing and the pace at which it is being developed. Poilievre and Peterson both argue that these barriers are not only hurting potential homeowners, but also influencing social inequality by driving up prices in already expensive markets. To address these issues, both Poilievre and Peterson propose several reforms aimed at stimulating housing development, while simultaneously making homes more affordable for first-time buyers. One of the key proposals is streamlining the approval process for new housing developments. By cutting down on the bureaucratic hurdles that developers face, Poilievre believes that more housing projects can be fast-tracked, leading to an increase in the overall supply of homes. Additionally, the focus would be on simplifying zoning regulations, allowing for more mixed-use developments and denser housing options in areas that are currently underutilized. Another important reform involves addressing the costs of construction. The high cost of building new homes in Canada is partly driven by the regulatory burdens imposed by municipal governments. By reducing these costs, Poilievre and Peterson argue that developers would be able to build more affordable homes.
They've been trying to suck up for the last 10 years and did nothing to support the right policies in the prior years. So that's going to have to change. The developers are going to have to inform people in the cities why housing costs so much. How is it possible that Olivia Chow can raise development charges by 30% and nobody in Toronto knows about it? Well, it's because the builders have not made it known. And so the builders take the blame when the housing costs go up. You have to actually, politics is a participation sport, not a spectator sport.
One of the most concrete proposals from Pierre Poilievre is his plan to eliminate the goods and services tax on new homes, a measure he argues would provide immediate financial relief to homebuyers, particularly those entering the market for the first time. Under the current system, homebuyers are taxed on the sale of new homes, which significantly adds to the overall cost of purchasing property. Across major Canadian cities, particularly Vancouver, incidents of violent crime, property theft, and organized criminal activity have increased, leading to growing fears within communities. The situation has ignited a broader conversation about the state of crime and public safety in Canada under Justin Trudeau's leadership. One of the factors contributing to the growing crime rates is the high number of repeat offenders.
Rapid introduction of the biggest crackdown on crime in Canadian history. A massive crackdown.
And what'll that look like, a crackdown on crime?
Basically, habitual offenders will not get out of jail anymore.
Right. 1% of the criminals commit 65% of the crimes.
Is that right?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yes. Well, criminals specialize just like everyone else, right? And the best predictor of offense in the future is repeat offense in the past.
Right.
So
in Vancouver, they had to arrest the same 40 offenders 6,000 times in 1 year.
Yeah, well, that's exactly a consequence of that specialization.
Those who cycle in and out of the criminal justice system without facing substantial consequences for their actions. Poilievre and Peterson have both pointed to Trudeau's lenient criminal justice policies, which they argue have failed to address the root causes of repeat offenses. Under the current justice system, individuals who have committed crimes, particularly nonviolent and drug-related offenses, often receive light sentences or are placed into rehabilitation programs that many experts argue lack effectiveness. While rehabilitation is a necessary component of justice, the system's reliance on this approach has failed to adequately prevent individuals from reoffending. Pierre Poilievre has proposed what he calls the biggest crackdown on crime in Canadian history. His reform plan is specifically focused on addressing habitual offenders and making sure that there are clear, strong penalties for those who continuously break the law. Another significant part of Poilievre's crime plan is the expansion of mental health and addiction services to prevent individuals from falling into cycles of criminal behavior. While Poilievre advocates for stricter penalties for repeat offenders, he also acknowledges that addressing mental health and addiction issues is necessary for breaking the cycle of crime. Canada has long been hailed as a beacon of immigration, with a history of welcoming individuals from all corners of the globe. The country's immigration policies have traditionally been viewed as a model for others to follow, as they have contributed to the nation's cultural richness and diversity. However, under Justin Trudeau's leadership, the landscape of immigration has undergone significant shifts, resulting in emerging challenges that threaten Canada's ability to manage and effectively integrate newcomers into society.
What's the scoop there?
Oh, we have to slow down the numbers. There's no doubt about it. We have to end the fraud in the international student and the temporary foreign worker program. We have to...
Well, Canada historically had a very effective immigration policy.
We just have to get back to the best system in the world, which we had for 150 years.
One of the major issues under Trudeau's government has been the increasing vulnerability of Canada's immigration system to fraud and abuse, particularly within programs such as international student visas. Many international students, some of whom come to Canada under the pretense of academics, are accused of using student visas as a pathway to permanent residency without adhering to the law. To deal with these issues, Pierre Poilievre has emphasized the need for a Canadian-first approach to immigration.
I want to say, look, we're not interested in the world's ethno-cultural conflicts. We welcome
the
people.
Shadow side of multiculturalism.
We welcome the people who come from places that have been afflicted by war, as long as they leave the war behind. And frankly, that was, most people come here to get away from those things. So by getting back to a common sense of values and identity and reminding people that they are, when they get here, they are Canadian first, Canada first. Leave the hyphens. We don't need to be a hyphenated society.
His focus is on prioritizing the interests of Canadian citizens, especially in light of the increasing pressures on infrastructure and services. Poilievre argues that a balanced approach to immigration is necessary, one that welcomes newcomers but ensures that the core values and needs of Canadian citizens remain at the forefront. Multiculturalism has long been a central part of Canada's identity, a policy aimed at celebrating diversity while respecting the rights of individuals to preserve their cultural practices. However, both Poilievre and Peterson have raised concerns about the potential negative consequences of multiculturalism when it is not paired with effective integration policies. While the ideal of a harmonious, diverse society remains appealing, the reality is that many immigrants have struggled to integrate into Canadian society. The result has been the creation of communities where individuals often maintain a separate existence, disconnected from the broader Canadian culture. Without efforts to promote a shared understanding of Canadian values such as respect for democracy, equality, and the rule of law, immigrants are at risk of being isolated from the larger society. This detachment can lead to the fragmentation of Canada's national identity and contribute to the development of parallel societies that exist outside the mainstream. Another concerning aspect of multiculturalism without integration is the risk of importing foreign conflicts and ideologies that demean Canadian values. Poilievre and Peterson have both raised the issue of how multiculturalism, when not paired with efforts to promote a shared national identity, can lead to the importation of conflicts from other parts of the world. These conflicts, whether religious, ethnic, or political, can become sources of division and tension within Canadian society.
Well, invented even.
Invented in many ways.
When I moved to Toronto, it was as race blind as any country, as any city could be.
Right.
Right. And that's flipped. And it's flipped because of that obsessive concern with race. Right. That was something we 100% did not need in Canada.
No.
Right. We basically, what would you say, imported and invented racism in Canada. Right. As a consequence of policy.
Wokeism seeks to divide people into these different groups and subgroups, and we see the results in a 250% increase in hate crimes. But we're going to get back to the basic principle that people are judged based on their individual character and humanity rather than by their group identity.
Poilievre advocates for a more selective approach to immigration, one that prioritizes individuals who are willing and able to integrate into Canadian society and contribute to its long-term success. The main point of Poilievre's economic plan is his goal of transforming Canada into a global hub for business, technology, and creativity. He believes that the country's future prosperity depends on creating an environment where businesses can flourish, and where entrepreneurs, whether in the tech sector, manufacturing, or other industries, are provided with the resources and incentives they need to succeed. To achieve this, Poilievre advocates for a more business-friendly environment, one that reduces the regulatory burdens that affect growth. He proposes cutting taxes for businesses, particularly small and medium-sized enterprises, to incentivize investment, expand job creation, and encourage the development of new products and services.
Let's bring it back. Let's make this the best place to get a return on your investment. Let's make this the best place in the world to do business, to bring hundreds of billions of dollars of investment, to dig mines, build pipelines, business centers, new tech companies, drill high-tech enterprises that you not only invent here, but you actually keep here, because it's not just a great place to lose money, but a great place to make money. That is the bright, optimistic future I see. I'm looking at models for this. You look at Ireland.
Poilievre's vision also draws from successful models in countries like Ireland, Israel, and Singapore. These nations have become renowned for their ability to attract global investment and nurture entrepreneurial ecosystems. Ireland, for instance, offers a highly attractive corporate tax rate that has drawn major multinational companies, helping the country become an economic powerhouse in Europe. Similarly, Israel has transformed itself into a leading hub for high-tech innovation, particularly in cybersecurity, AI, and biotechnology. Singapore, with its strong regulatory framework, excellent infrastructure, and emphasis on education, has cultivated one of the most dynamic business environments in the world. Jordan Peterson's reflections on leadership provide a powerful lens through which to view Pierre Poilievre's political journey. Peterson has often spoken about the necessity of principled leadership in times of crisis, and he believes that Poilievre's steady resolve and willingness to confront Canada's economic and social challenges head-on make him a rare figure in today's political space.
Mr. Pierre Poilievre, who is the leader of Canada's Federal Conservative Party, but also, barring catastrophe and God willing, Canada's next Prime Minister, a transition in power in this country is likely to take place sometime between March and October or November of 2025. And it appears very probable that Pierre Poilievre is the heir presumptive and will be the next Prime Minister of Canada.
Moreover, Peterson encourages Canadians to take an active role in supporting Poilievre's vision for the country. He argues that Canadians must embrace the responsibility of their civic engagement, understanding that true political renewal cannot come from top-down mandates alone. It requires collective action from the people, and each individual must play their part in advocating for the changes necessary to secure a better future. Poilievre's mission to restore Canadian values, strengthen the economy, and unify the nation is deeply tied to his conviction that Canada can once again be a country of prosperity and stability. His vision goes beyond political rivalry. It is about the future of Canada and its place in the global order. To achieve this, Poilievre calls on Canadians to embrace change and reform, to step forward and demand that their voices be heard. What do you think? Do you believe that Poilievre's vision can lead Canada to a brighter, more prosperous future? Let us know in the comments.